right, everybody, welcome to this week's CybHER conversation brought to you by Peraton. CybHER is a program out of Dakota State University in Madison, South Dakota that works to motivate, empower, and educate girls in cybersecurity. My name is Sarah, and I'm an outreach coordinator for CybHER. I'm joined by Kanthi, our Chief of Operations, who will be moderating the Q&A session. And I'm also joined by Dr. Pam Rowland, who is one of CybHER's co-founders. At any point during the program, you can ask a question using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We are so excited to chat with today's guest, Melissa Benua. Melissa has worked in nearly every software development role, dev, test, DevOps, and program management at companies big and small. She's created and run high availability, high quality services for PlayFab, Bing, Cortana, and Xbox One, and now for mParticle's enormous data platform. Melissa discovered her love of massively scaled systems while growing the Bing backend, where she honed the art of keeping highly available, complex systems up while undergoing significant code churn. She's now a director of engineering with mParticle. She's passionate about not only maximizing efficiency, but also about sharing best practices among colleagues in the tech world at large. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone, for having me today. So I'm really happy to be here and to tell you all a little bit about myself and hopefully share something that will be useful and valuable to you all, no matter where you are in your journey or stage or wherever you're at. I love questions. Questions are fantastic. So please, at any time, feel free to drop something in the Q&A if you want to know a little bit more about something or less about something, and I will do my best. So let's see here. So I am a director of engineering at mParticle. I've been in the software industry since about 2005. So that's a long time. I did graduate with a computer science degree from a university called Florida Tech, and I moved immediately into the software world. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with it. I remember being in university. I actually started as a dual astrophysics and computer science major because I was pretty sure that I wanted to be an astrophysicist, and my mother was pretty sure that not only would I not, but also they don't make nearly the same amount of money as somebody in computer science did, even back then. So she encouraged me to maybe try both, see what you like best, maybe try both. And sure enough, my mother was right. Something I've learned to come to terms with as I've gotten older and have kids myself is actually my mother was right. And I do really love software engineering and computers and making cool programs and solving technical puzzles. So that's what I do all day long now. That's what I've done most of my career is I solve puzzles. I solve puzzles all day. The puzzles vary, right? When I was first starting out in my career, they were a lot of, here's my requirements. How do I solve the puzzle of my requirements in order to make some software that makes sense and meets them and is tested and is good quality? And then the puzzles got bigger, right? How do I not just take these requirements, but also how do I help invent the requirements so that I know what problem I'm trying to solve, and then solve the puzzle, and then build the code and design the architecture to do it. And now that I am in engineering leadership, my puzzles are, what are the business problems, and then mapping those into not just, here's the code I need to write, or here's the services I need to stand up, but here are the people I need to do it because I can't do it all myself. So here are the people and the skills that I need in order to solve this problem. And maybe those people or skills don't exist. And so how do I get those to exist, whether that's hiring or training or both? How do I figure out what the right number of people is to solve a problem? How do I scope it? How do I make a long plan so that I know my puzzle isn't going to collapse at my feet in 3 months? So that's a lot of what I do now. I like to think of computer science in general, no matter what aspect of computer science you're in, whether it's software engineering or product management or cybersecurity, right? It's all just various types of puzzles and problem solving. So when I first graduated from university, I worked at Boeing, and I was in, I worked on a military plane. I was writing test software to simulate hardware that didn't exist yet because they were inventing new hardware. And I worked on a team with, it was with a lot of women. I worked, for the most women I've ever worked with in my life was at that first job at Boeing. I worked with on a 50-50 team. And that is, for those of you who are new to the industry, that's unusual. I really value the experience, and it taught me that, it is possible if you make an effort. There were women in leadership, women who'd been with Boeing for 20 or 30 years, women who were fresh out of college, and all the way across the line. And it was an excellent culture of building each other up and helping each other learn, and helping us to solve these puzzles. And so I was there for a number of years. We solved some cool puzzles, and then I decided I wanted puzzles that moved a little faster than airplanes, because by necessity, when you're building software for airplanes, you have to go slowly and carefully, because if you forget to test something, bad things happen when it's an airplane in the air, compared to if it's, your word processing dock. If your word processing dock crashes, it's fine, but maybe not the other way around. So I left Boeing and I joined Microsoft, which is why we're talking about word processors. And so when I was at Microsoft, I worked on a thing that was then called Live Search. And I don't know that many of you will remember what Live Search is a thing, or MSN search if we're going even further back. But probably you all know Bing. I was part of the Bing launch team. And when I was at Microsoft, and on Bing in particular, is when I got exposed to all kinds of things, all kinds of disciplines in computer science, software engineering, and really saw how they play nicely together, and how you really can't have one without the other. So everybody's journey and path in technology is going to be a little different. It's going to be a different makeup of skills and specialties, but those skills and specialties, it's not just one. You don't have to pick one and commit to it forever. They're related, right? You can have 2 or 3. You don't have to be very, very, very deep and exclusive. And so when I was at Microsoft, my official title was SDET at first, which means Software Developer in Test. Later, it was SDE, because we decided we didn't want to have a division. As a company, we decided we didn't want to have a division anymore between people who wrote code primarily for tests and people who wrote code primarily for product. We became the same thing. But I started my tenure there focusing on testing. And testing is really broad too. I did a lot of product testing, I did performance testing, and that's where I started doing security testing as well. So I got to explore a lot of aspects of software testing, software development, project management, because there was a lot to get done. And when you're on a highly supportive team, you can play a little bit with a lot of things. Being better at security made me a better software tester. And then later, being really good at software testing and security made me a better developer, because I knew more things to be careful of, right? You get to know not just the rote reason of, yes, you need to sanitize your inputs when you're writing code, but you learn why you need to sanitize your inputs, because you know how to craft an attack, you know how to craft a SQL exploit. And when's the first time you do it to code that you or your team wrote, you never again question why you need to sanitize your inputs, why the common sense things, quote unquote, why they matter. The same time, right, I learned as being a developer, why sometimes when things come down as fiat from the security teams, why those might not land well. Right? Why sometimes you need to have experience shipping product code in order to have empathy for the things you're asking the people shipping product code to do. I had at one point, the security team said, you guys need to run this security scanner tool. It's really important. It's going to catch a lot of holes. And we said, okay. But it turns out the security scanner tool took 4 or 5 hours. And by the way, that was 4 times as long as the build. And so the engineering team went into revolt, because we don't want to multiply how long it takes to get a task done by 4, right? Nobody wants to spend all that extra time. And there was I wasn't in charge then, but there was a big discussion about, well, but you don't take security seriously, and the engineering team saying, well, but you're not taking our our deadline seriously. And by having empathy, right? Security having empathy for engineering, and engineering having empathy for security, by having walked a little bit in each other's shoes, they could have avoided that finger pointingness of, well, you're not doing what I need. Well, you're not doing what I need. So I find that I spend now as an engineering leader, I take a lot of my experience with these different silos that can exist in software development. And my job isn't to break down the silos so much as to build context in between the silos and help them have context, and from there empathy. I find that empathy in software engineering can be a superpower, not because people don't have it, plenty of people have it, but they don't know how to apply it and why it's so important. Because with any work that you do in a team, right, software engineering is heavily team-based. The lone wolf developer thing is a myth. That's not to say I haven't seen lone wolf or rockstar or 10x developers, whatever it is we're calling them today. It's that they're not as useful as a good functioning team. A friend of mine works at a place called Bungie. You all might have heard of it. And one of their core values that I've adopted as part of our own is no hero is greater than a team. And I think that that's very true, right? We tend to, especially in media, tend to rhapsodize about the lone wolves and the heroes and the heroic efforts. But really, the people who do the best work are the people doing their job day after day in a team, and the team is thoughtful and works well together, and diverse, especially, and respectful of each other. They have empathy. And so these are the things that my career has taught me that are most important. No matter what your specialization is, somebody there, their superpower needs to be empathy. What else can I tell you? So that's what I do a lot now. I think I said I build teams, I help teams understand each other. And it turns out that when you help teams to understand each other, they also tend to understand their customers better. And then they build better products. And when you apply, when you apply empathy to anything, it's transformational, right? When you apply empathy to your engineering team, they build better products. When you apply empathy to your hiring practices, to people that you want to hire, you hire better engineers, and more people want to come and work with you. I flipped over one of the most recent things I did, because we're hiring a lot at all levels, is we took a long, hard look at our hiring practices and the hiring practices across the industry, because I'm sure, especially those of you who are in college right now, are familiar with the perception of what, and the reality, unfortunately, of what interviewing is, right? You have to solve a series of puzzles, and you have to memorize all of these algorithms, and they might make you write a depth first search, but what if you only remember breadth first search, and you better know trees really well? There's a lot of rituals around hiring that maybe are and maybe aren't grounded in the realities of what it actually means to do a job. And so part of applying empathy to our hiring processes was saying, is this A, useful for us, and B, fair and good for the people who are coming in to do a job? Right, and our conclusion was actually no, right? When we use empathy to look at what we're making candidates do, like it doesn't make sense, right? It's out of bounds with what our expectations of them are going to be. So, right, we apply empathy to our processes, to our hiring process, and we said, okay, what actually do we need to know, right? What is the puzzle of hiring? What do we need, right? What are the requirements? And then we can say from this set of requirements, we can come up with something that's thoughtful, but useful for everybody. So we changed from having puzzles and trick questions and how many manhole covers are there in New York, right? Silly things like that, to you're going to be asked to write code and it's going to look like this on the job. So please go take 2 hours, and here's a set of requirements, and here's a template. Please go write this code. When you're done, we'll talk. It changed to, here are the three main skill sets we need somebody in this role to have. Let's craft interviews just to demonstrate it. Let's keep interviews to half a day. Let's be respectful of people's time. Let's be respectful of people's investments. And it turns out that people like to be treated well during interviews. Surprise, surprise, people are excited to work for a company that is thoughtful and empathetic to people during the interview process. So hopefully you all are seeing a theme here about puzzles and empathy. What else can I tell you? So yeah, that's what I do all day long. Solve puzzles, display empathy. I solve puzzles for people. What else? I just want to actually, I'll pause for a second and see if anybody has questions. I know I've been talking for a few minutes now.
We do have some pre-submitted questions if you would like to answer them. And
Sure.
I have a couple of questions while you were talking. I was busy writing down so I wouldn't forget. So you had said earlier in your career, you had worked with a 50-50 team. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that again later in your career, in your different roles, or has that been like the one-off experience?
So, and again, this is going to be my experience. Not everybody experiences this, but after my first role at Boeing, I did not work with another woman, female engineer, right? I've worked with female PMs, female, tech writer, but I did not work with another female software engineer again until I hired them myself recently. So I spent about 12 years without another woman in leadership or another engineer on my team. My experience is unusually bad. We used to joke about Highlander roles because you can have only one. But yeah, so and now that I am in the position to personally make a change, I have personally made a change. So I've changed my team's makeup alone from being 5% female because it was just me to 30%.
That is wonderful. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So you had mentioned the different, the interview process, how it's changed a little, how it's modified a little now from very extremely strict interviews until you talked about depth first and breadth first. I even forgot those terms. I have a bachelor's in computer science engineering, and I completely forgot about those. But is there any one piece of advice that you would give to someone going in for an interview for a similar role?
Yeah, so the most important thing I can give, especially to people coming out of college and especially to young women, is that you are interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. Ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. There's no dumb question, there's no bad question. And if the company doesn't, right, if the interviewer doesn't like you asking questions, that's a red flag that maybe they're not the company for you. Because what's it going to look like once you start as a new hire? You're going to have questions. And if they don't want to answer questions in the interview, are they going to be okay answering questions after you've started? So the most important thing is to ask questions and to be curious and to learn, because it's going to tell you a lot about the company you want to join. And the company's interviewing practices, again, will tell you a lot about the company you want to join. Are they making you do rituals for the sake of rituals, right? Are they asking you about manhole covers in New York because somebody asked them and that person asked it because it's a chain? That tells you that company believes in rituals without founding, even after the industries have moved on to better practices. And if they have rituals around that, what other, deprecated rituals are they going to make you do? So pay attention, right? The tech matters, right? Of course, you should study whatever, study whatever questions. If you're going to a software engineering role, make sure that you're familiar with the basics of software engineering, that you're comfortable discussing performance characteristics, that you're just comfortable with, like, the basic data structures. If you're going for a cybersecurity job, make sure you know about exploits, you know about processes, you know about SOC. The same thing, right? Depending on the role that you're going in for, make sure you know the basics, but then make sure that you are going to, what information you want to know, what kind of team you want to join. That if, having an empathetic team that builds each other up, if that's important to you, make sure that you get the information you need to find that out.
I like what you said about being an empathetic leader, and I also like what you said, most people are able to empathize, they just don't know how to do it, or they just don't know how to show it.
Right.
And that makes a lot of difference. It does.
It does. Even a simple thing like saying thank you, right? We often don't say thank you very often for little things. One thing that my teams do now, that all of engineering does, is we have a weekly meeting, and we start our weekly meeting. We start our weekly meeting with a dad joke, but then after we started with the dad joke, the very first thing we do is kudos, thank yous, and high fives. We spend 5 minutes for the whole organization with people just thanking each other for good work. Because empathy is a muscle, right? And you have to practice expressing it. So we practice all the time.
I love that. So just like an open form of communication, just saying thank you, because most people don't say thank you. You see, when you said about the little things, you hold the door open for someone, they'll just walk past you. Sometimes they won't even acknowledge that somebody else is opening the door for them. And when they say thank you, it kind of, it's a good feeling.
Yeah, it's a little thing, but those little things add up.
Yeah, they do. So, over the course of your career, then, have you had mentors or anybody that helped you guide your way through the different roles to see what you wanted to do, to help you understand what's going on? Or
I have. So I've had mentors. So I actually, when I talk about this, there's actually 3 categories here. When you have people who support you, right? There's mentors, of course, which is somebody who gives you advice. There's sponsors, which is somebody who gives you advice but then pushes you forward, right? We'll nominate your name in a meeting as somebody who should lead a product. Who will advocate for you. And then you have buddies who maybe aren't really far ahead of you, maybe don't have maybe are on the same level as you are, but they build you up. Right? They're a sounding board. They're a trusted place where you can get information. So I've had mentors, and mentors are great. But I've found mentors are great when you want to learn about something, you don't really know about it, and they can help you guide your course, help you build a path to learn something. So I've had a couple of mentors when I've had something that's specific I want to learn. Once I feel like I've learned something, though, what you really want is a sponsor. Right? You want somebody who's, may have advice for you as well, of course, and feedback, but is going to, right, is gonna throw your name in the hat when something new and exciting is coming up, right? Who's gonna say, yes, Melissa can do this. And you also want your peers, right? You want some buddies among your peers so that when you're in a meeting and you make a good point, but nobody seems to react to it, and then somebody else makes the same point, they can jump in and say, yeah, and like Melissa just said, blah, blah, this is a good idea because X, right? You need all 3. You need all 3.
yeah, you do. And somebody to help you understand, somebody to advocate for you, and somebody to say, hey, you know what? They just said that. Maybe we could try doing that.
Exactly.
Somebody to advocate for you.
Exactly. Other people to back you up, and different people will be able to back you up in different ways.
Yeah.
Right, the same person, sometimes you can have a buddy and a sponsor be the same thing, and sometimes you can have a mentor and a sponsor be the same thing. Usually can't have a mentor and a buddy. Well, you could have a mentor and a buddy in some cases, right? But the important part is that you're getting all three of those needs covered for you. And mentor tends to be this really, people tend to think of it as this really formalized, official process, which it can be. But the other two don't have to be formalized, and that makes the relationships both more casual, but can be more genuine.
Yeah. And I think with the younger generation now, it's more, I wouldn't say informal with the mentors. It's not as formal as before it was.
Yeah.
They're more open to communicating, they're more open to understanding, expressing their concerns, their doubts. And I think it's a little more informal.
Exactly. I've had plenty of mentors who, if you had asked them if they were my mentor, they'd have been like, huh? But they were, right? Because we met up, we talked, I would get useful information from them just as a part of our conversations and our interactions and our like hanging out and drinking whiskey.
Yeah.
Right? I would learn things from their life experience, but I'm not sure they would ever have thought of themselves as my mentors.
Exactly. Are you a part of any communities or groups that help you with your work?
Yes, so I've got a couple of different groups. So I am the Seattle chapter. A friend of mine and myself lead the Seattle chapter of a group called WOSEC, which is Women in Security. In the before times, we ran monthly meetups and hangouts. We've been doing Zoom hangouts, which are less exciting for people, but we've started doing some casual meetups again. To support women in the Seattle area who are in cybersecurity. I also am a member of, I've been doing some work with Women Who Code. I'm a member of a couple of different software testing communities because I have a lot of friends there, especially I do a lot of conference talks. So we have a group of us who are more buddies than anything else, and that we build each other up. We advocate for each other. We put each other's names and recommendations for things that seem good, help each other get new roles, help each other hire people. We're just, we build each other up. I find it very important to have your communities, even if they're not, literally all around you in person every day.
What's the coolest thing that you've ever done?
Ooh, so the very coolest thing I ever did is when I was at Bing. Well, I have two cool things. So I did a lot of cool things at Bing, especially because there was room for cool things. So the very coolest thing I did is we were having, it was called a bug bash on a new launch of this Facebook and Bing integration. This was years ago, like years and years ago. The Facebook and Bing being integrated was this cool thing. OAuth wasn't a thing. Like it predates OAuth, if that tells you anything. So we were doing this bug bash, we were looking for bugs. And I was doing a lot of security testing at the time. I was really deep in security testing. And I was trying out exploits. And I managed to craft an exploit where if you sent somebody a link to a Bing search, you could post whatever you wanted on their Facebook wall.
Wow.
I found an exploit in production across site request forgery, including posting information.
That is very cool.
That was really, really cool. And this was years ago. It was fixed, obviously, really quickly. Right, but cross-site scripting was a new thing. Cross-site request forgery was a new thing because we didn't have auth. We were barely able to figure out how do we share cookies? People weren't used to that, so they didn't handle it correctly. The other really cool thing I did is I have a long talk about it. You all actually can probably find it on YouTube about this thing called the fuzzing service. So we had a service that did load testing. I kind of owned the service. It basically sent little sanitized copies of test traffic into production, or from production into test, so that you could test under load without shipping the code live and seeing what happens. And I took this library of this fuzzing library. So I took this set of exploits across a bunch of different fields, it included a lot of weird inputs, like what happens with a null input, what happens with, whatever. And I made it so that we could intelligently fuzz this constant stream of traffic. And I uncovered like 20 different crashing bugs that had been pre-existing live in production, but we just didn't know about. Which is to say that somebody could send a query to the search engine and the server would crash. So it was a DOS waiting to happen, 20 DOSes waiting to happen, that I found in a day.
Oh, in a day.
In a day, as soon as we turned the service on,
Oh,
immediately crashed, immediately.
Oh my
A bunch of different things that had been living in production, some of them for years, but because nobody had found and exploited them, they just hung out there. So I found and exploited like 20 of them in a day.
Very cool. Oh my God. That's so cool.
And that is the importance of cybersecurity.
Yes.
We are almost out of time, so I will wrap up the Q&A with one last question. What advice would you give to all the young people that are watching the session right now?
My advice would be to be curious and to explore things with an open mind. When I was in college, I had what I thought was an idea of what my career and my life would look like if I continued down the software engineering course. And I have to say that what it looks like now is nothing like I could have imagined. The possibilities and the things that exist for this career were nothing like the stereotypes that I was fed through media from wherever. I have a lot of fun. I have a great team that loves and cares for each other. And we do great work with interesting problems and awesome people.
Be curious.
Be curious.
All right, everybody, I'm going to be launching a poll here in just a second, and we would very much appreciate if you could take a second to fill that out. It just gives us a little bit more information about you all. Please follow us on our social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check out cybher.org for more information on all of our programs and our upcoming conversations. Thank you for joining us again, Melissa.
Thank you.
And everybody have a great rest of your day and see you next week. Bye.
Bye.